let's get this ball rolling. This is Triangulation, Harmony, and Dissonance. Introduction by Douglas Gwilym. I can't believe your grandmother gave you that damn harmonica. The whole drive home, you were breathing in and out of that thing, making sounds that left your father in fits. We had to stop for a potty break, and I picked you up and gave you a little perch on a rest stop picnic table and explained. It's like flying a plane. The really important part, sweetie, is getting off the ground, and then you just have to get the thing landed again, right? Your eyes were wide. If you start here, I showed you just where to find the C, and always bring it back to the beginning at the end, it will sound like music. Which, of course, sounds insane, and your response was to watch me very closely and move your mouth like a fish. And in a minute, we were back in the car, and you weren't playing. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, trying to figure you out, and you just looked thoughtful. We were getting off the interstate when I heard you say my name. We were getting a light drizzle, but I turned off the wipers to be able to hear you better. Just like a story, right, Mommy? Took me a minute to put it together, but yes, I told you. It's just like a story. Get the plane off the ground, take it somewhere, and get it on the runway again. A song is kind of like a story, and good thinking, dude. Do they come from the same place, Mommy? Songs and stories? You asked. I lied and said I didn't know. And now it's the middle of the night, and I guess I'm not surprised to hear the sound of the harmonica coming in over the air conditioner's white noise. I stand with my head resting against the door frame for a minute, trying to maintain that delicate balance with my footing that keeps the squeaky floorboards from giving me away. The sounds I'm hearing are impossible. Short little bursts of melody. Nothing crazy complex or anything, but repeated. New melodies coming to rest on top of the old. Counterpoint and harmony. The sound of two, and then four, and then a dozen first graders noodling on a harmonica all at once. Am I dreaming? Have I lost my mind? The surface tension between not wanting to disturb you and my own breathless, panicked curiosity breaks, and I turn the knob and lean in. Always the fear with this maneuver at this time of night is that the light will be on and you'll be bouncing off the walls in non-sleep. But the lights are not on. For a moment I struggle to see you. There's too much motion. Pieces of construction paper are flying around the room. The pages are intricately laced with words, your signature backwards B evidenced everywhere. The teachers all tell us not to worry about this until you're 7. But my brain can't quite grasp the words because of the motion and the madness of it all. The pages are doing a dance in the air. I spot you. You're wearing those jammies, the ones I secretly hate, and your hair is whipping around your face. Impossibly, improbably, you are standing over the wicker clothes hamper, pulled to the center of the floor from its usual place in the corner behind the door. There's something inside, and the something is lighting up your face, both giving you an expression of joy and casting a fiery orange light there. The harmonica drops from your hand. The music is all around like a chorus of crickets. They do come from the same place, Mommy, and it's wonderful. Your motion is quick, decisive. I leap from the doorway as soon as I catch that it's happening. There is a foosh sound as the air is sucked out of the room for an instant. Construction paper and stuffed animals rain down on me. And then I'm standing over an empty hamper. My ears have popped and my eyes begin to water. I peer down into the rectangular space. You did it. I'd never been able to do it again, but you've done it. Of course you have. My heart nearly bursts, and I'm crying. I do what there is to do. I sit down on the floor in your room, crisscross applesauce, and fan the pages out in front of me. I begin to read. Martian Raga by Phillip Trippenbach and Blake Jessop. Dropping into a low Earth orbit is the only part of the voyage from Mars that Sahana enjoys. After 9 weeks of queasy rotational gravity and star-filled emptiness, catching sight of the old world is magical. The trip is still dangerous. Even after decades of regular travel between the 2 planets, arriving intact is an accomplishment. As the crew prepares to dock with the landing shuttle, Sahana and her ensemble do what every musician in the history of touring has done first. They check the gear. Rather than print all of it on Earth, Sahana insisted on bringing a few cases along as out-pressure cargo. There are some compromises even she is not willing to make. The Martian musician leaves her crash couch to see a crescent sliver of blue and white in the portal. Nearer, past the Terminator, Earth's night-side cities glow like a bed of embers, a world about to ignite. She tears herself away from the view and cranes to see the cluster of cargo pods. One of them wobbles past her, making a hard shadow that oscillates across the hull. It must have shaken loose from its moorings during the final burn. The feeling of anodyne wonder recedes. Like all musicians, Sahana worries more about her instruments than herself. She hits her comms switch. "Zhao, check cargo 6, where is it?" Chatter and static hiss in her earphones. Finally, Zhao comes back. "It seems to have come loose." "I know it's loose. I can see it drifting past the starboard viewing gallery." Sahana's sitar is a work of Martian art, 2 meters long and massing almost 25 kilos. She plays it seated on a tall stool, giving her long arms and fingers the full range of its graceful neck. It's made of ferrosilicate alloy, and the inside of the resonance chamber is coated with clay from a riverbed in the Cerberus Plains that last touched water 1 billion years ago. Sahana is its 3rd caretaker. The pod tumbles past her porthole. "Sahana, I don't think they're going to be able to retrieve it," Zhao says on the radio. I'm sorry." The sitar was made during the 1st generation, when the great domes of Chryse Planitia. Beep, 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 beep. The sitar was made during the 1st generation, when the great domes of Chryse Planitia first went up, one of the very first instruments designed to make music in the thin, oxygen-rich atmospheres of the habitats. Sahana watches the pod tumble until it vanishes. A moment later, a shooting star burns a luminescent line toward the horizon. The little cylinder winks out. Somewhere far below, Sahana's sitar disintegrates over the Indian Ocean at Mach 25. I'm sorry about your instrument," Zhao says on the shuttle down. "Just bad luck. We'll print you a new one." "The easy way is for easy people," Sahana says. She wants to cry, and the gravity is making her queasy, but Martians are the opposite of easy people. The Terran tour manager wears his long black hair tied back in a neat bun. He is a useful mixture of local guide and general factotum, ostensibly on loan from the kindly, ineffectual United Nations. Sahana hates politics. She avoids them on principle as the exact antithesis of music, but even she doesn't buy Zhao's backstory entirely. The Terran is effective. At least, he manages to turn printing a new sitar into an ornate mixture of truth and reconciliation ceremony and press junket. He beams and struts for the news cameras as the Martians stand awkwardly behind him. Witness the immaculate molecular fidelity of Martian materials printers. Sahana can't tell if he was pointing at the printer assembly or at them, swaying in the exoskeletons the Terran government lent them to deal with the crushing gravity. She handles the new sitar with a dull ache behind her eyes. It looks jarringly identical to the one she lost. Cameras flash as she gives the instrument a surreptitious sniff. Even the smell is accurate. Sahana tries her hardest to smile for the cameras. Copies of the advanced heuristic algorithms used to print the sitar are the first olive branch extended from Mars to Earth. While the belligerent governments try to resolve differences so fundamental they threaten to starve her entire colony, Sahana and her ensemble will play. The hope is that the Terrans will learn something from Sahana's music that can't be heard in transmissions uploaded to the mesh. Maybe the sight of live Martians performing live music will bring a rapprochement unavailable to intractable diplomats and euphemistic politicians. Had Sahana volunteered, she probably would have found this objective noble. She did not volunteer. She and her ensemble, 2 other sitarists and her drummer, were selected. Martians are plural and independent autarchists, but everyone is shot through with a sense of collective responsibility. Life under regolith-covered domes and nano-weave canvas bubbles is communal and mutually reliant by definition. As much as Martians cherish their individuality, every last one grows up with a profound sense of what's best for the entire community. The impulse is stronger than law. It is culture. Sahana's Martian soul requires her to visit the world of her ancestors because that world is on the verge of sanctioning Mars so harshly that her entire race might as well be under siege. Sahana is among the very best musicians Mars has produced in its 100 sovereign years, and by far the youngest master composer. To deny that she is the best choice for an interplanetary goodwill tour would be to deny her own talent. She attached her band to the diplomatic mission in great fanfare, their faces on every news feed in the 7 habitats. She still didn't want to go. All through her preparations, Sahana voiced objections to the trip, all of them valid and all of them explained away, all of them correct, as it turns out. There's barely any time to practice before the first show, and Sahana's new sitar betrays her immediately. It is a molecule-for-molecule copy of the original, but the original wasn't meant for Earth's thick, cloying air. Despite obsessive tuning, it sounds bassy and false. The less she thinks about the first concert, the better. The audience was quiet and the hall perfectly still, totally devoid of the background hum of machinery that defines the Martian landscape. Perfect sterility. Classical Martian music is fluid and improvisational. Emotion drawn from the vulnerable mortality of rippling habitat walls, and tempo copying the sound of air circulators and the heartbeat of the audience. In that first concert hall, Sahana closed her eyes, took a breath, and tried to find the opening notes of the raga in an embarrassed, inward-facing silence. None of the instruments sounded right, and the exoskeleton added a stifling mechanical perfection to her movements up and down the frets. The ensemble played well, in spite of everything. Competent by their exacting standards, but boring. To her surprise and dismay, the Terran audience clearly knew it. The tour visits India, where Martian music has its roots. It's another press event, of course, and Zhao shepherds journalists as Sahana touches a real wood sitar for the first time. It's a tactile delight, although the thing is pitifully small. When she spreads her long fingers, Sahana can reach entirely around its neck. She has to sit uncomfortably cross-legged to play it for the cameras, and her limbs clank in the exoskeleton. The brief joy of smelling pungent toonwood quickly turns into alienation. The instrument would hardly fit a Martian child. She can't imagine composing music with it. And yet, spitefully, the Terran sitar sounds more like hers ought to. It knows how to breathe the air. In a hidden corner of her heart, Sahana felt that her old sitar had betrayed her twice, once falling from orbit and again on the ground. She realizes she is wrong on both counts. Neither she nor it belongs on this world. It's as simple as that. Riding back to the hotel from a concert in Mumbai, coughing clotted air, Sahana recognizes the fat face of a man who sat in the front row. He's 4 meters tall on a roadside screen. Martian talks stall. The scrolling headline reads, "Council meets in Mumbai. Is war imminent?" The ensemble travels and plays and travels, too fast to touch the ground. Zhao keeps the seats filled with the Terran elite. In China, Zhao takes her to see a table tennis match, and it's the first time she's seen him excited, miming the lightning hand gestures unconsciously. The perpetual smirk she wears as armor dissipates. The speed is unbelievable. Every trajectory a motion blur, reminding her how much faster this world moves than hers does. To punish herself for whatever she's feeling, Sahana practices without the exoskeleton. She's exhausted after 20 minutes, but it doesn't help her sleep. Zhao uploads a looped recording of mechanical habitat noises for her, but even with the buds in her ears, her dreams are fitful. You can kill a colony as surely with an embargo as you can with interorbital missiles. Better, actually. Scarcity is not a weapon that misses. She tosses and turns, the gravity compressing her into herself. When the ensemble leaves for the Terran Antipodes, everyone is snapping at one another. They have all reached a breaking point. Australia is the tour's last stop. Still trying to make the most of them, Zhao parades the Martians through a nature park where Sahana meets a koala. She is immediately possessed by the urge to cuddle the animal, but they won't let her touch it. It's so hot, the creature will apparently bite her if she tries. Considering the baking heat, Sahana hardly blames it. The species went extinct during the rising waters, but the local government clones them. Riding through the glass valleys of downtown Sydney, Zhao tells her how much it costs. Sahana almost falls out of her seat. You could run a habitat dome for a year for each of the ridiculous little things. Against a gently bobbing backdrop of solar-powered ferries, Sahana faces the media one last time. She keeps her eyes low to ignore the terrifying, limitless sky. She gets vertigo almost every time she looks up, automatically reaching to check an EVA suit readout on her forearm that's never there. Drone cameras swarm around her. Kathleen Nguyen, FBABC, one of them chimes at her. "What are your first impressions of Australia?" "It's incredibly bright," Sahana says. She's supposed to answer this obvious question with one of a series of pat answers, but she can't help herself. This oppressive sun is not the clear, cold star she's used to. The heat makes her feel dizzy. Earth needs better temperature controls. She turns to an actual human reporter. "John Cortland, BBC," he says, sticking his microphone up toward her face. "And what about the people?" "You're very short," she says, hoping they'll find that funny. "But the food is excellent. It's hard to believe how much variety there is. Your pavlova is wonderful, but Vegemite tastes like deuterium tailings." That does elicit a muted laugh, and she's back on script. The interviews are all like this, repetitive, soft questions, barely scratching the surface of what separates her from them. Music alone, Sahana has come to think, cannot break a biomaterials embargo. The last show is at the Sydney Opera House, a building so famous there's a colony dome in Chrysoplanitia that shares its name. Something about it makes her emotions stir, like nano-weave canvas moments before a dust storm. They take one of the ferries to the venue. Sahana has never seen this much water in one place. It's surreal. Thunder builds on the horizon like a nebula. and Sahana sees her first lightning. When the thunder cracks, she starts violently. She realizes she's smiling. Earth has shown her a storm, and that, at least, is beautiful. It's a shame, Zhao says, that we didn't have more time to get this right. We're too different, Sahana replies. So it seems. The talks haven't gone very well, have they? Sahana asks. I thought you weren't interested in politics. I'm not, Sahana says, but I read up on who you're bringing to our shows. I couldn't sleep. Did you honestly think that making Terran politicians and movie stars listen to a Martian Raga was going to stop the embargo? Zhao is uncharacteristically quiet as they glide over the impossible expanse of water. Sahana can't stop wanting to reach down, scoop some up and drink it, even though she knows it's full of salt. Printing tech for biomaterials, she says. You have what we want. We have what you want. Why is this so complicated? Nothing is that simple, Zhao says. But to answer your first question, yes, I really believed we could help. I wish there was more I could have done for you. You can't change gravity, Sahana says, glancing balefully at the struts strapped to her arms. I wish we could seal the audience in a plastic bag and correct the air pressure. At least they could hear the chords without all the ridiculous bass. This isn't a Martian habitat, unfortunately. Sahana blinks. They're pulling into dock, and the opera house towers over them. Sahana squints and then laughs. Up close, she can see the building is covered in tiles almost exactly like those in her shower stall back home. She gazes up at the magnificent structure. It really does look like a hab, and it's designed to control air and temperature for Terran musicians. A radical idea enters her mind, and she dismisses it as terrible. It returns unbidden, dangerous and appealing, as they alight and walk inside. She shoos it away again, but the idea notices her smile. It hangs around and whispers in her ear. The more it does, the less she cares. Consequences start dropping away from her like the mad blossoms that fall from Terran trees. Zhao, if this was a Martian habitat, do you know how quickly we could pressure seal it? Sahana asks. You mean if there was a pressure loss? Zhao says, narrowing his eyes. About 20... come on. Beep, 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 beep. Zhao, if this was a Martian habitat, do you know how quickly we could pressure seal it? Sahana asks. You mean if there was a pressure loss? Zhao asks, narrowing his eyes. About 2 minutes with good drill. That's how we live. Oh, okay. She's answering the question. Beep, 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 beep. Zhao, if this was a Martian habitat, do you know how quickly we could pressure seal it? Sahana asks. You mean if there was a pressure loss? Zhao says, narrowing his eyes. About 2 minutes with a good drill. That's how we live. There is no open sky, no open water. Without pressure, we die. No one who understands that would ever dream of cutting off trade. That's why we're so different. None of you understand. I have the feeling you're not just engaging in a display of political philosophy. No, Sahana says, and their eyes lock. Do you really want that audience to hear how a raga is played on Mars? Zhao looks at her a long time. Yes, he says, I do. Sahana believes him. She's gotten to know Zhao the way she gets to know people from other domes. Unfamiliarity tempered by the need to rely on one another. Well, Sahana says, I'll tell you what we could do. She tells him, and the Terran actually laughs. The opera house's interior is full of reassuringly low light. Sahana shouts orders like a starship captain, and the confused Terran stage crew obediently hangs the space with canvas. Zhao and his subordinates set up a battery of hastily rented wind machines, draping their exteriors with noise-canceling acoustic membrane. They pillage counterweights for sand to line the aisles. While the bemused diplomats and flashy stars get themselves seated, the Martians surreptitiously seal the doors shut with pressure-sensitive epoxy. They work as, through the place... Beep, 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 beep. They work as though the place was really leaking atmosphere. It takes longer than 2 minutes, but not much. They leave the 2 main entry doors open, only sealing them when the last of the guests take their seats. A few noses twitch, but the Terrans remain stolidly polite. The crowd only gets rattled when they start changing the air. Sahana's ears pop pleasantly as the pressure drops. An alarmed murmur ripples through the crowd. The ensemble starts tuning up as the vent system cycles out most of the atmosphere and ups the oxygen content. These are familiar feelings for Martians. The Terrans probably won't notice a thing. The audience starts panicking almost immediately. Shouting voices demand to know what's happening. Sahana finds it mildly insane that people with so much air would be so sensitive to pressure changes. Zhao gets it almost exactly right. Only 2 concert-goers faint. It's around then that someone tries to leave, only to find all the doors epoxied shut. Sahana finishes tuning. The sitar finally sounds right. She leans into her microphone. "Please don't be alarmed," she says. "We've glued all the doors shut with emergency atmosphere sealant." The audience is alarmed. Very alarmed. People get up, trip over their neighbors, and gesticulate wildly at the stage. Sahana starts enjoying herself. She motions to Zhao to start the wind turbines. The canvas that makes up their makeshift dome starts to rustle. As the opera house's climate system starts replicating a Martian storm, the screaming begins. Sahana smirks. It's pitiful. Martians do not react like this in emergencies. Everyone stays calm, no matter how scared they are. "Please take your seats," she booms into the mic. "They're terrorists," someone screams. "We are musicians," Sahana says. The air mix is just right. She feels at home. The thunder in the bay crashes in her imagination. "We are Martians." She hits her garage string hard. The note is clear and deep, completely free of the polytonal wobble caused by muddy Terran air. Sahana wants to giggle. With a feeling of delicious recklessness, she waits for the ripple of the canvas to strike a good note. A wind-blown UN security guard runs to the edge of the stage and points a weapon at her. It's made of bright orange polymer. Sahana finally gets angry. She lives in pressure vessels. She stops wondering if putting the Terrans through this was the right thing to do. "Unseal the doors," he yells, "now." "Not until you listen," Sahana yells back at him, her voice holding firm against the storm. "We came to play a Martian Raga. You came to hear it. Well, hear this." The canvas howls, and Sahana begins. The ensemble picks up behind her. The improvisation makes order out of windy chaos. It has the proud defiance of a wild dirge. Playing this moment through her mind is what drove Sahana to execute her plan in the first place. She expects screams and condemnation. If they are too different to hear one another, so be it. Let them be aliens. Instead, most of the audience stand still. The sand and wind derange the Terrans' fancy clothes and ridiculous coiffures. Dust swirls around the cavernous pseudo-hab. The yelling dies down, and Sahana feels something new. As the ensemble comes together and starts the kirtan, something strange happens. The crowd's energy shifts. To her astonishment, a few dance. Martian crowds typically sway. The man with the gun is swallowed in a sea of movement. As they crash toward the end of the first passage, everyone holds their breath. The energy of the room has changed. Not apprehension, expectation. Sahana feels that thing she hasn't felt in almost a year. Ebb and flow, call and response. But there's still something in the way. The exo hums as her fingers dance up the frets. The suit makes her movements perfect and mechanical. Too perfect. Sahana reaches one hand to the opposite wrist and slips it out of the exoskeleton's braces. When her arms are free, she immediately feels the weight of the old world. She reaches her fingers to the long neck and lets gravity dictate her tempo. The music slows with Earth's gravity, but Sahana's style allows it. Martians are born to improvise. The melody is no longer a frenetic attempt to reach escape velocity. The rest of the ensemble follows her, and Sahana finally touches Earth. She feels its ancient weight, not as inhibition, but history. Like meeting a sister she'd been separated from at birth. Distance and familiarity at once. Sweat beads and rolls as she plays. Her arms and fingers ache. The music flows around her, and she can feel the audience beyond the lights. They're dancing. She can feel it on the floor. Dust and air blow around them, and Sahana learns that the Terrans are no more immune to spontaneity than she is. The ensemble plays for 40 indescribable minutes. When the music rises to a crescendo and then quiets, the hall quiets with it, drenched and panting. Sahana reaches a weak hand to shield her eyes from the lights. She hears a collective indrawn breath. She can't imagine what will happen when it's released. The response is extreme by Martian standards, though Sahana will later learn that it's exceptional even for the locals. Rapturous. Rather than the subdued approval of a Martian audience, the Terrans roar. They wave their arms and clap with abandon that Martians would consider scandalous. For a moment, Sahana isn't sure if it's a battle cry, a prelude to assaulting the stage, but as the stage lights drop, she sees 1,000 joyous faces. Until this moment, Sahana had thought of her earthbound cousins as traditional and stuffy, relics from the old world. They surprise her completely. The outpouring of approval and affection is so unfeigned it makes her blush. Zhao and the rest descend to the front of the stage as Sahana blinks into the wall of cheers. They motion her forward. Sahana tries to wave, but finds her arms as limp as loose strings. She straps back into the exoskeleton and joins her companions at the front of the stage. The cheering gives way to sustained applause. This, at least, the orientation manual covered. They link hands and bow. As they unbend, Sahana gazes into a sea of faces as full of emotion as hers. Either a tear or a bead of sweat trickles violently down her cheek. It is as beautiful a shock as she has ever felt. The droplet falls from her chin with meteoric, alien suddenness to patter on the stage. Sahana knows with perfect clarity that she will never belong here. She was right to think of their two races as irreconcilable. Her only mistake was to assume it made any difference at all. It's as good as seeing her first sunrise alone in an EVA suit, maybe better. As they straighten from a second bow, light leaks in from the doors as someone finally gets them open. There's a rush of wind as the pressure equalizes. It blows through a million strands of damp hair. Sahana, still smiling as broadly as she ever has, watches bouquets of flowers whip toward them in sharp, unfamiliar arcs. Phillip Trippenbach is a London-based journalist, writer, and social media expert. Blake Jessop is a widely published Canadian author of science fiction, fantasy, and horror stories. Martian Raga is the second collaboration to feature Phillip as composer and Blake as librettist. Stay tuned, more are on the way. You can check out Phillip's work at 30secsf.com or follow Blake on Twitter at everydayjisei, J-I-S-E-I. Hey, so this is a fantastic example of the wonderful folks I got to work with at Triangulation. What a great time I had, and man, the artifacts are there. Check out Triangulation, Harmony and Dissonance and Triangulation Appetites, and also Beneath the Surface and anything Jamie has done, and the editions since, the Dark Skies edition with Chloe Nightingale and Diane Turnchek. And now my friend John has been at the helm. My friend Isaac Payne as well. These are excellent editions. Please come check them out. Triangulation is a unique beast. Seeing a theme through a filter of fantasy, science fiction, and horror. It's been a real pleasure to work with everyone there, and I'm really proud of our editions. If you'd like to hear me read some more, come check me out on YouTube. I have a channel dedicated to the proto-weird 19th century and Victorian and Edwardian and early to mid-20th century weird fiction. Hey, and check out my Amazon page as well, Douglas Gwilym. Be well, and I'll see you soon.